How far does your theory provide what you might call a poetics of religious varieties, the different religions that there are in the world, their similarities or sameness, and on the other hand their difference? Do you think it helps us? Do you think it helps the student of comparative religion in any way?
Yes, it's a view of comparative religion, because myths are being always are extremely different in the stories they tell you, in the type of evil committed by the god, and the opposite as well. But they are one in their structure, their scapegoat structure, their misunderstood scapegoat structure. In a way, religious diversity has been the major argument against religion in the West. When you become aware of the panorama of world religion, you cannot believe in any of them, because they are all alike. But they are all alike, but some interpret themselves and some do not. You know, in Vedic thought, you have many intuitions that are the same as the Christian ones.
Yes.
You don't have Christ, of course, so it's totally different. But it reveals that many of the things that are in the Gospels can also be reached by another religious path. The mimetic theory acknowledges the similarity, the fundamental similarity between mythology and the Gospels. In many myths, it would be wrong to say all myths, because our definition of myth is so vague anyway. But many myths, like the Gospels, begin with a collective murder, and are an interpretation of that collective murder. And the Gospels is that as well. And this, of course, is the basis for the assimilation of the one to the other, which goes as far back, at least probably much far, well, no, not much farther back. 2nd century Celsus. Should we say Celsus in Latin? Yeah. Celsus, who was the first one to see the similar structure in the Gospels and mythology. These foolish Christians, who don't realize that it's fundamentally the same structure. And more or less he says that the Gospels are obviously a myth. And it makes it possible, of course, to say, yes, it's the same structure, but it's not the same interpretation. And from this comes my own definition, which is a myth, is a misunderstood scapegoat phenomenon. Therefore, a real scapegoat phenomenon, because it's part of the definition of scapegoat phenomenon that it is misunderstood by the people who see it as true. And a correctly understood scapegoat phenomenon, which turns against the scapegoat phenomenon and proclaims the innocence of the victim. Therefore, there is no modern scientists should become aware of this difference, since they should have read at least the Gospels and be aware that Jesus is regarded as innocent by the disciples, but not by the crowd. Therefore, it fits completely our second pattern. And the non-Christian, of course, don't see that difference. That's the reason why my definition, far from being anti-Christian, is in a way the difference between the gospel and mythology is a difference in the interpretation of a phenomenon which is correctly interpreted in the gospels and incorrectly interpreted in mythology. You know, many people use the similarity of structure between Christianity and many myths as proof that the two are the same. In both cases, you have a central murder by a collectivity, and it ends up with revelation of the scapegoat mechanism. But only in the Christianity is the victim fully justified and the scapegoat mechanism. So a myth is a scapegoat mechanism that works, and Christianity is a scapegoat mechanism that does not work.
No.
And the negative aspect, of course, makes it unusual in this type of interpretation way. Yeah, it goes against the grain of humanity.
Yes.
And what is interesting is that the Bible will come in when it shows in a way that the scapegoating is false.
Yeah.
But it can be read, in some ways it's more original. And I think in the Ancient Testament, it's the story of Joseph is archetypal in that respect.
Yeah.
You know, the youngest one was the scapegoat of his 12 brothers.
Yes.
And 12 brothers, it's a crowd.
Yes.
And they treat him badly. And he's innocent.
Yes.
And not only does he forgive them, but he forgives them when one of his brothers refuses to accept the scapegoat trick. You know, when the brother of is Benjamin,
yes.
When he says, I bring Benjamin the first time if you want to receive grain from me.
Yes.
And then he gives them grain and says everybody can go except for Benjamin.
Yes.
I keep Benjamin. He doesn't want to do any wrong, but he's testing his brothers.
Yes.
And only one, Judah, they first decide to leave altogether. Then Judah turns around, literally, and says, I cannot stand it. Keep me instead of Judah, instead of Benjamin. But there he recognizes them all. The Christian and the Judaic texts like the discover about human anthropology phenomena that mythology will never discover.
Yes.
Cannot discover.
Yes.
Maybe that certain Far Eastern philology, mythologies, you have phenomena which are similar, but it will simply prove that they have that same insight, which is a natural insight, but extremely uncommon before the arrival of Judeo-Christian language. You see the relationship between a story like the story of Joseph and a text like the suffering servant, the lynching by the crowd of the suffering servant, which has always been acknowledged as prophetic of the Passion. But you can find dozens of texts which are prophetic of the Passion. People should have worried a little more before about the tremendous amount of collective murders and that sort of thing in mythology in the Gospels. The main argument against Christianity, if you don't interpret it correctly, is that one, look, you're dealing with the same sort of thing, why should you differentiate between the two? Well, you should differentiate because one interprets correctly and the other one doesn't.
How would you translate the word prophetic in, let's say, modern terms?
In modern terms would be the gradual evolution towards a naming and an understanding of scapegoat phenomenon and its importance for the foundation and the perpetuation of community. In order to have sacrifice, you must know about the mimetic phenomenon, but take it as some sort of unexplainable gift of the God, which you piously repeat without understanding what it means. If the God taught us this, it's in order to save us. Therefore, we repeat sacrifice, and indeed it provides a catharsis that keeps the community at peace. Therefore, archaic religion is true, as well as Christianity. It's true in a much more limited range, but its efficacy is real. It is true in all respect, whichever way you look at it,
Yes.
where it looks most false.
Yes.
Yeah, to modern man,
Sure.
who does not understand what mythology is.
Yes.
How important is in your account the fact, the historicity of the gospel?
It is very important. It is absolutely essential, because it's not only, it's an incarnation of the truth. You almost have to use the terms of theology in order to state what it really is. It is an incarnation of the truth in order to teach people this truth. To be a disciple of Christ, or to listen to the disciples, is to understand that the situation which is described and interpreted is a correct interpretation of everything that is misinterpreted in mythology. Because to be in mythology is to be the victim of the phenomenon which a reader of the Gospels that accepts what is said, that regards them as true, will understand. It is amazing in a way that the connection has not been seriously made between the two. In other words, in a different vocabulary, I think what is striking in the mimetic theory and should prevent people from dismissing it as they usually do, is that it fits completely, in some respects, the relationship that we become aware of scientifically in the modern world between mythology and the Gospels. But of course, the people who use the anti-Christian people would not recognize the fact that we are dealing with, in one instance, in a correctly interpreted myth. So if we understand mythology, if we interpret it correctly, and I think that mimetic theory does, of course, we can say literally scientifically that it's thanks to the Gospels. And that's enormously important. Fraser is very powerful in the sense that he's the first one to use the word scapegoat in its modern sense. You know, the word scapegoat, everybody talks about it, but doesn't realize that in chapter 16 of Leviticus, the modern meaning is not there. A victim accused falsely by an entire community. It's not there. When does it appear? If you take the Littré, which is a French dictionary, most authoritative, it is the historian Saint-Simon, who is writing in 1820 or something, writes a sentence which is, maybe I already told you that. Madame so-and-so is a scapegoat of her own salon.
Wow.
Which is a marvelous sentence. You see what I mean? And apparently that's the first use found of the modern meaning, because she's scapegoated by them, but they don't know it, and she doesn't know it in a way. It's a social phenomenon. It's a pure social phenomenon. That in French it would be the first example. And in English, I don't know. I looked at it, but I don't remember. There is no such thing that's that striking. But it's about the same time. You see. And this is a purely Western phenomenon, because that was clearly marked by the Japanese scholar, what's his name? Yamaguchi, that you cannot say scapegoat in Japanese. You have to you use the English word. Yeah. And it's not. It wouldn't be true to say that no one in Japan understands what a scapegoat is. Now they do, of course. But the first real understanding that comes spontaneously is a Western phenomenon. And is in the 18th, early 19th century, which is pretty late, you know.
So how do you interpret that? That in a way you have to wait for modernity, actually.
That it's Christianity, but that there are forms of understanding that are subconscious, unconscious, whatever word you want to use. You know. If you can say Madame so-and-so is a scapegoat of a salon, in the 16th century they would not have understood what was meant by that. Or it might have enlightened them to it.
So implicitly you are saying that modernity is
superior.
Yes, in Christian terms.
It's not, you know, a purely scholarly phenomenon. Everybody knows what a scapegoat is today in those terms. So, you know, Fraser is the first one who understands psychologically that primitive cultures have scapegoat phenomena in that modern sense. But he does not apply it to himself.
No.
And he's absolutely sure it's an exclusively archaic phenomenon. In other words, there are no scapegoats in England in the 19th century.
Although there was
He does not say so explicitly, but it's obvious from his reasoning.
Although there was the Dreyfus affair Dreyfus.
Yeah, well,
you know.
That's why I say the Dreyfus case is an enormously important thing. Because that a whole country, the judicial system, would be acknowledged as wrong is really the most spectacular acknowledgement of scapegoat, you know. And that it would be a Jew by Christians.
Yes,
it's just
it's a paradigmatic psychodrama of a whole nation, but which encapsulates
and
the
I
phenomenon.
think one should write something on that subject.
That's probably something still
on the
to be
fact
done
that the intensity of the fight, you know.
Yes, the Dreyfus case is one spectacular focus point of awareness,
as you see,
of this phenomenon.
Because you have the whole authority of the state, confirmed, reconfirmed, and so forth, and a bunch of people who keep fighting.
Who were outside that
and
common
they
persuasion.
were very conscious. They didn't use the word scapegoat, but they were very conscious of what they were doing. Was unique.
And when people say, of course, this is an archaic phenomenon, it's very possible to turn around and say, well, what was the gravest event of the 20th century? It was the Holocaust. What was the Holocaust except the scapegoating of an entire people, which was
and
in a
which
sense...
people, you know.
Which people, precisely, and with which background in national tradition and
so it's a religious significance. It's just so enormous
as well.
You know.
So the notion that we're beyond scapegoating is one subject to caution.
It's subject to caution in the sense that most people are not.
Yeah.
But the knowledge today is readily available.
Yes.
For, you know, it was not before. Or the combination of extreme acuity in Fraser and total blindness. The idea that it was a purely archaic phenomenon was another way of scapegoating itself. And the way Fraser was rejected, there is something wrong about that. There is something that proves that people sensed there was something dangerous, you know, for our whole edifice of nationalism and so forth. And it's very symbolic of anthropology too. Oh yeah, sorry. That Fraser would do that with archaic culture being himself a great anthropologist.
Yes, yes.
So you can say early anthropology is a continuation of the scapegoat mechanism within a threatening knowledge, which is unstable.
Yes.
Which is unstable and which he tries to stabilize.
Yeah.
Then, immediately after Fraser, what everybody said about Fraser was he's a great anthropologist, but his business of scapegoating is such nonsense and should be expelled from anthropology immediately. And you could collect quotes there that would be absolutely marvelous.
Yeah.
For their ironic content. So I think what's happening with anthropology is a reversal of that, of Fraser. And at the same time, you cannot condemn Fraser because Fraser will tell you things that no one had said before. He's the first one to use scapegoat in a great way.
Yeah. Your theory really is also a theory of human moral obliquity, isn't it? The fact that we're never entirely lucid about ourselves, morally speaking.
Or if we discover something dangerous, we shelter ourselves.
Yes, we take
another slide,
we go away, we offload it.
Sure. Because Fraser has become, in a way, the archetypal figure of the self-satisfied anthropologist, Westerner who looks down at the...
Yeah.
It's true, but at the same time, look what he did. I mean, the way he used the word scapegoat.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, that's
and in a way, the two things are related. One got rid of Fraser with his worst aspects, expelling the best with the worst. What Christ is aware of is that by understanding the scapegoat phenomenon, it cannot remain the basis of society. In other words, you cannot have God's protective through sacrifice and so forth. You have to do away with these things. Therefore, you're in a situation of the tools of cultures, the tools of human society against violence is gone, which is sacrifice. It's very interesting to read comments on the New Testament in the 20th century because they dislike apocalyptic text and it makes the gospel scary and therefore unfit for modern consumption. And they are very happy that there is no direct apocalyptic text in John. And in a way, you sense, it would be an exaggeration, but you sense a preference given to John, which I think is due to the lack of a direct apocalyptic description, which is present in the three synoptic gospels.
But your own understanding of the word apocalypse, what is revealed? Is it the foundations of our culture, which are lying and not like God? Is it also the revelation of the nature of God? What is revealed in Apocalypse?
Yeah, it's
and
both in the sense that the scapegoat phenomenon, which dominated mankind and made mankind peaceful, being understood, becomes totally unavailable. Therefore, the Apocalypse, if you look at the apocalyptic text of the Gospels, and another, from the point of view of the mimetic theory era, of the people who are concerned with the apocalypse, is that most of the time they don't know much about the New Testament. And they think that the main apocalyptic text is the Apocalypse of John, because the word is in the title. And the word is in the title because the title is merely the translation of the first sentence. the Apocalypse of John, you know. Whereas in reality, you must understand the presence of scapegoat phenomena. But if you really understand, you realize that what the Gospel is talking about is a revelation of the apocalyptic mechanism. So when this mechanism is revealed, you cannot have any more. We are in a society which, bad as it is in a certain way, cannot have new scapegoat phenomena that would found a community, you see. And therefore we are deprived of the main defensive tool of the community system, which is its scapegoat mechanism.
Your understanding of that concept of apocalypse is interesting because it seems to take away from religious skeptics the sense which they're fondest of, which is a kind of millenarian sense of kind of end of the world catastrophe, which is the fruit of the wrath of God. That's a fundamentalist use of that word. Very often.
It's purely human.
Yes.
There is no divine intervention.
No.
Sure. That's why the divine intervention is the abridgment. If these days had not been abridged. Therefore the apocalypse is not a few days, it's an era. I would say it's a modern era. If these days had not been abridged, no one would have been saved, because Christianity would have disappeared completely, and the memory of it as well. So you can consider that this abridgment is regarded by Jesus as the work of God. Yeah. The end will come more quickly than it should naturally. By definition, these texts were nonsensical because they talk to you about great upheavals in the world and the tumult and storminess of the waters of the ocean. You see what I mean? The two together. This combination, which sounds totally nightmare, fairy tale. One of the reasons apocalyptic texts have not been taken seriously in the modern world is that they seem to be especially untrue, foolish, because they mix nature and culture in the violence, you know. But our world, the goal of science is to separate totally, in a way, violence from nature and show it's human. You could say it's one of the goals of science. And in the apocalypse, you have a mixture again. But in the modern world today, as I say in this country, if there is a new cyclone in New Orleans, you don't know what's a part of man and what's a part of nature. Therefore, we are back scientifically, because scientists will say, yes, we don't know what's in a mixture of the two, which is very surprising because the goal of science is to separate the two.
I don't know whether you saw a recent television programme by a philosopher and theologian from Nottingham, which talks about this whole area. And he quoted from Darwin a sentence, apparently to the effect that he saw no ultimate opposition between a creator and the theory of evolution. He does find a sentence in Darwin which actually says that.
Because he wouldn't have said that earlier.
No, he wouldn't have said that earlier. No.
At the end of his life, you see.
Well, I think so. I mean, I will examine that and actually find
a double check
on that.
Yeah. In a way, I think it's been the evolution of many people.
Yes.
Because you feel that the Catholic Church, for instance, at the beginning they hesitated. But when they hesitate, the Catholic Church, they say, we have plenty of time. We can wait for 200 years.
Yes, before we decide, yes.
But the last Pope said something about Darwin's theory being more than a theory.
Yes.
There is a sentence there, yeah, which is not
Yeah.
justified, which is
Yeah.
just...
But even in Anglicanism, which was the main and obvious adversary in the original debate at Oxford, Bishop of Oxford took the religious view. I mean, they were talking about a version of Scripture and a particular philosophic argument, the argument from design, which was limited both by its provenance and by its acceptance at that time. It was much more limited, and even within Anglicanism, Darwin died and was buried in Westminster Abbey. You know, there was a pretty broad acceptance by people like Charles Kingsley, and who was a reverend priest at that time. And the big trouble, the big polemic around Darwin was really in this country, in America.
How do you see that debate from your point of view?
I'm not sure I have a general view of it, but it never bothered me, because I never felt that there was any coherence to it, or anything really that could pose any problem from my point of view. So it never really interested me.
Okay.
Isn't that because you, in a sense, short-circuit the problem? You never get to the point where the problem occurs, because you take us round another way. You never talk about looking at the order of creation and deducing from that order that there is a transcendent origin and cause. That's not the way your theory works at all. You say, no, let's look at anthropology, let's look at man himself, what is religion represented, is religion itself evolutionary and open to transcendent potentials, is there a point at which that those transcendent potentials are realized, that they become revelatory? So in other words, you give us a version of religion which is itself evolutionary in a sense. But evolution reconcilable with revelation. So in your thought, these two are not antagonistic
because revelation
notions.
Is primarily the revelation of the falsity of earlier religion.
Yes, the falsity or the inadequacy of the basis, the human basis of religion.
That's it.
And most people will say, well, religion is either a natural phenomenon or a supernatural one.
That's right. It cannot be both.
But it can't be both at the same time. And it seems to me that what your theory is superb at suggesting is the idea, actually, that opposition is a false one.
False one.
That revelation may emerge and be crystallized, obviously, at certain key junctures.
Yeah. And it's interesting because at the beginning, when Things Hidden was published, there were some people who could see that, you know. Then I was informed informally that the French bishops were considering a meeting with me, you know.
Really?
And then after that, it was cancelled and something, and there were voices going in the other direction.
So you think there was a moment of hesitation about whether your theory was receivable within the French Catholic tradition?
Sure.